very warm welcome to everyone here. For first-timers, you're at the leading exhibition and conference for construction, design and energy in the built environment. And you're with 33,000 decision makers, architects and developers and representatives from local government and major infrastructure companies. So you're in very good company today. For those returning, the new theme this year is one of regeneration. You might already have looked around Eco-Build City, Regeneration Drive with all those lovely plants. It's good to have a bit of greenery in a building like this. So that gives you a taste of the innovation and creativity on offer across the industry. We're here for this first session to talk about the title you'll have seen in the programme, Ready for the Future, What's Next for Sustainable Housing? Namely, what we need to do about the housing shortage. How can the country ensure that new homes are sustainable, affordable, adaptable, and promote healthy lifestyles? Senior industry leaders are going to discuss how we meet all of those challenges today. I'll be back after this first session, but for this first session, I'd like to hand over to your chair, Julie Hirigoyen, who's Chief Executive of UK-GBC, the UK Green Building Council, which is, as I'm sure most of you in the audience know, a charity and industry-led network with a mission to improve the sustainability of the built environment. So please welcome Julie Hirigoyen.
Good morning, Eco-Build, and welcome to the first of what will be 3 UK Green Building Council Leadership Insight sessions. UK-GBC is delighted to be lead partner of the exhibition once again this year. We're very happy to be here, and we're here on this morning to talk about one of the reasons we put on these Leadership Insight sessions is because we believe leadership is absolutely paramount to achieving our mission, which is the radical transformation of the built environment, to radically improve the sustainability of the built environment. So we know that we can't achieve that without cultivating leadership mindsets and attitudes and attributes amongst individual professionals, like hopefully many of you, but also amongst individual businesses, so that they strive to implement sort of best-in-class corporate sustainability strategies and lead in delivering sustainable places and buildings. We're here this morning to talk about housing. So I've gathered this morning, or we've curated several of the industry's current and future leaders who I'm delighted to be here with us this morning. Let me introduce them first, and then I'll say a few words about the key challenges that are facing the sector. So first up, Tony Pidgley, CBE, Chairman of the Berkeley Group, a FTSE 100 house builder which won the Queen's Award for Enterprise for its achievements in sustainable development back in 2014. Dan Batterton, Fund Manager for the Build to Rent Fund at Legal & General Investment Management Real Assets. It currently has 900 homes under construction and is aiming to deliver 1,000 new build to rent homes per year from 2019. Next up, Bevan Jones, who's Managing Director of Sustainable Homes, a not-for-profit organisation that supports the housing sector with research, accreditation and advice. And finally, last but not least, Claire Murray, Head of Sustainability for Levitt Bernstein, a firm of architects and urban designers. And Claire is also an alumni of UK-GBC's Future Leaders programme, so can give us the next generation of insights. A very warm welcome to all of you. So to kick us off, I thought I would flag a few of the rather substantive challenges facing the sector, particularly the housing sector. So first and foremost, I want to highlight the scale of the challenge. Depending which figures we look at, we know we need to deliver somewhere between 200 and 300,000 new homes every year between now and the end of this Parliament, if not beyond that date. And that's something like at least 2 to 3 times what we're delivering at the moment. And that's just new homes. We know that some of our existing homes are amongst the leakiest in Europe. And we also know that if we're to meet our carbon emission reduction targets, we're going to have to retrofit or refurbish 25 million homes by 2050. That's 1 home every 1.5 minutes, or 1.4 minutes. So it's quite a challenge, some challenge. Now, the next major challenge which relates to that is, of course, to make sure that the homes that we do build and refurbish actually work for the people that live within them, and that they're able to deliver strong performance, that they're adequately future-proofed. Because if we don't ensure that we build to the right levels of quality today, we're just going to be adding to that 25 million number of homes that need to be retrofitted in the near future. And we also know that many of our current homes don't work that well for people living in them. Latest statistics from BRE suggest that the total annual cost to the NHS of poor quality housing is somewhere in the region of 1.3 to 1.4 billion pounds a year. So there's a fairly significant challenge there as well. Now, obviously, the issue of affordability is very high on everyone's awareness and on the agenda, and it's a very substantial challenge which relates to some of the others. Obviously, house prices have continued to increase as the supply has been constrained, and our levels of home ownership have dropped very substantively, particularly amongst younger generations, where they've probably halved in the last decade. And that's not just a problem of affordability for house buyers, it's also private rents, which have soared as well over recent years, particularly in the capital and major conurbations, where quite often rent increases will outstrip wages and cause real issues there. There are, of course, a wide range of public policy and sort of planning instruments and solutions that can help to improve the standards of the homes that we build, and that can also help to deliver more supply and unlock some of the sort of building that we need to see. But in this era of austerity, as we know, local government cuts have been very severe, up to 40% in some cases, and the planning departments themselves have been hit particularly hard. So there is a lack of resourcing and a lack of sort of capacity within the planning departments in particular, and that's at a time when lots of other challenges, aging population, social service provision, social housing standards and so on are sort of particularly pertinent, as well as the, I should say, central deregulation drive, which has done away with many of the national standards of quality like zero carbon homes and various other things. And then finally, there's this problem of, or there's a perception challenge around the unintended consequences that sometimes can be associated actually with some of even the tightening energy performance standards themselves. So for instance, 83% of Londoners suffered uncomfortably hot homes at least once during 2015. An interesting stat, given that 2015 was also the hottest year on record until 2016 came along. So really challenging environment within which to build the ever-increasing quality of those homes and at the same time deliver some of those fabric improvements. So, panelists, you've got a fair number of challenges to respond to. I'm going to give you each 5 minutes for your initial response, if possible, and let you hand on to one another, and then I'll come back up and chair a Q&A where I'll bring in, hopefully, some questions from the audience as well. Thank you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what I'm going to say about diversity in 5 minutes and well-being, but sustainability has always been at the forefront of Berkeley. And it's such a wide word, and it's such an important word, and it has such an effect on people's well-being and their whole way of life. And it really started for me many years ago, some 20 years ago, when we built what's called the Barnes Waterside in Barnes, for Peter Scott and Lady Scott. And they really taught us about, you know, what is sustainable, what is it about. Everybody wants a home, everybody deserves a home. So, you know, people's well-being is where we start. Yes, we can talk about CHP plants, we can talk about modern methods of construction, which all help with it at the end of the day, but really it's about that diversity, and we are the only house builder that's ever won the Queen's Award for sustainability 3 times. But it's about building a safe environment, somewhere where people can go home to, somewhere where children can play, somewhere where senior people can go. It's about influencing what we do. It's about setting standards. The future of sustainable housing really is about the place. I mean, a number of our sites at the moment, we've learned if you can get conservationists involved, right, they do it for nothing, they look after it, but what they do, it becomes sustainable for centuries. I mean, we have a number since we built the first wetlands. I mean, we have a big 5,000 unit development up in Hackney. Well, there's 42 acres up there of wetlands. It's for the people. It's free in perpetuity. You can go there and relax. You can think about it. You start understanding it because there's no simple answer to this. So it's not just about house building. It is about well-being. It is about diversity. It is about broadband. All things that future-proof a community and make it easy for people to live sustainably. So what do we do at Berkeley? We always start off with a sustainability strategy. It's part of our vision. It's part of our commitment. I'm not even going to say we got it right. You know, we have too many trucks moving about. That's why we're all looking at modern methods of construction. But brownfields, that's great. That's a good place to start. 90% of what we do is on brownfields. Good public transport helps. If you can walk to stations, if we can build around hubs at the end of the day, especially when we're in large cities. Mixed use, you know, something for everybody. Community centres, something that makes people feel they belong. Parks. I mean, if you look at our parks carefully, we have areas where senior people can sit and relax and read a newspaper. We have the other end of the park where children can play, make a lot of noise and feel free. When we have something in the middle, we call them Four Seasons, but it's all about what makes it a great place. The quality of the public realm. You know, we study the public realm, we look at it. And then if you move to the product, is it sustainable? What makes it sustainable? Is it storage? Is it well-being? Is it making it, you know, heat-proof at the end of the day? I mean, it's everything. Then you move on. 5 minutes, are you sure? So I've got is 5 minutes. I could be here all day about it. You know, I mean, I welcome Sadiq Khan. I think where he's gone as a mayor about pollution needs to be addressed. We've made a public statement that we want to be a low-carbon house builder, and that's one hell of a challenge. I mean, you know, and we're working that at the moment, and I wish I could sit here and give you all the answers today. But investing in the environment is what it comes down to. You know, green roofs, rainwater harvesting, electric car charging. It fascinates me as a country why we're still not using more electric cars, and especially with pollution. That's why, you know, I think Sadiq Khan moving pollution up the agenda is a good thing. We need to address this pollution, right? I mean, we put electric cars in all of our sites. We leave them there, and it amazes me how little they get used. I mean, when we did the first development at Chelsea some 20 years ago, we put 5 in. I fully expected people could complain. We're still only up to 10 electric cars today, and it's pretty mean of us when you look at it. You know, and then the energy from low-carbon technology. So we're trying to go above it, but I think it needs all of us, whether it's, you know, home compaction, whether it's the way we sort out our refuse, the way we manage our refuse, the way we encourage people to use cycles, the way we get rid of the car, it's everything. I mean, you know, and we've made tremendous progress there. So, and then there's one other area that I'd like to touch on quick. 4 years ago, we started working on social sustainability. And I think it's probably as passionate a move in Berkeley at the moment as anything. We committed to a net biodiversity gain on every site we have. This year, one of our latest brands is putting landscape at the heart of it. If we can get more trees, if we can get more green spaces there, it's about it, you know. And the good thing is that we have a JV with National Grid, and at the moment, I think we're up to quite a considerable number of sites. Well, they're brownfield, that they break every rule in the book, they're contaminated, so we're bringing them back into placemaking. All right, we talk about life, space, buildings. You know, you want to go home, you don't want to walk down a corridor, it looks like you're in a prison or in a barrack. Your front door's got to invite you in. Then you can get people looking at technologies, how they do it, how they manage heating systems, right? So you start first of all in housing, thinking about the people, then design the space. And once you've understood all that, the site, the landscaping, life first, then space, and then buildings, right? Anyway, I won't say any more because there's enough controversy in there. There's enough for you to debate with us, and I think we need a bit. But, you know, sustainability is the starting blocks, is part of our vision. And I mean, the more example we get, the more people that think about it, the more people that discuss it, the more people that care, the more progress we will make. And I'm sorry to be so lightweight about it, but it's a big subject and we need a lot of time to debate it. But thank you.
Thank you, Tony. That was great.
Good morning. I hope you can all hear me. I'm Dan from Legal and General. I guess I'm the investor in the room. I work for a pension company, so what am I doing here talking about houses, I suppose? Well, we're looking at build to rent as a new sector. It's been now talked about by government, so it must exist. And we're trying to take pension fund money that is sitting in bank accounts, earning nothing in big pension pots, and turning that into building homes and creating rental cash flows for pensioners. So it's a different business model to the traditional approach to building houses. And if we need to build another 100,000 homes per year, we need new business models to build those homes. The current business model isn't broken. It works. We just need new additional business models to build additional homes. Where we're different is that our timeline is extremely long. So I'm thinking about 20, 30, 40, 50-year investments in a single site. And that is hugely liberating when it comes to looking at how much you're going to spend on your build, how you're going to design the building, how you're going to operate that building, where you're going to build in the first place. Regeneration areas are great for what we're doing in different areas of the country. But it allows us to incorporate much more elements of sustainable construction and things like green roofs and PV panels, because this isn't to make us feel warm and cuddly and so that it looks good in a CSR report at the end of the year. They make hard economic sense when you're looking at 20, 30, 40-year investments. An area we're trying to look at the moment, and this isn't easy, I should be up front, we're building 1,000 or so apartments at the moment. We don't have any residents yet. Our first building's complete in 3 months. Our marketing website for that went live yesterday, so if anybody here wants to move to Salford, there are some apartments there available from May. But trying to influence the behaviour of residents for the long term through our design. So inclusion of car clubs was one comment. One thing we're struggling with, to tell you some of the challenges we're coming up with, is how do we incorporate green clauses into a traditional private rented lease, into an AST. And it's been very hard to find any examples of that in the UK. So we're looking around at how we can include those. So forcing benchmarking on the residents. So tell the person in apartment number 1 that they are the worst polluter in the building and see what impact that has on their behaviours. I don't know what impact it'll have, but it's going to be fun sending them the report, I think. Tony mentioned social sustainability. I think this is a really important point. It's certainly politically important to planners about establishing areas where all sorts of demographics, all sorts of people earning different wages can live in one area. And again, taking that long-term view, that is what establishes a long-term community. So in a scheme we're working on in East London, we're providing just under 100 apartments specifically for key workers because they're needed in that area. Without the key workers, people won't want to live in that area because there won't be doctors and nurses and teachers. So taking that long-term view, we need to provide these things. I guess the last point I'm just going to touch on is it's modern methods of construction and modular construction particularly. We've set up a factory just outside of Leeds, and that is working through prototyping at the moment, and there'll be some big announcements in the next couple of months, so I won't say too much. But the aim there is to create 3,000 homes per year out of one factory with 500 people building them. And I think what the exciting thing for me isn't so much all of these houses coming off a production line. The exciting thing is the new business models that then allows. When you can build that quickly, you can build to order. That changes the business models that are potential, and then that allows to help continually bridge that 100,000 apartment gap with with other business models other than build to rent and with build to sell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Bevan Jones, I'm Managing Director of Sustainable Homes. Sustainable Homes delivers consultancy, accreditation and research for traditionally the social housing sector, but we work across all sectors now. Our mission is for every home to encourage sustainable lives, and really what I'm going to talk about today is where through Shift, which is our accreditation and what we're mainly known for, where we have found what the social housing sector is doing and where it's performing in terms of sustainability, what that tells us about that sector and what it tells us about the wider housing sector, but also where that particular sector and by implication other sectors need to go. I did have some slides. Oh, there we go. There you go, there's a bit of colour. So, like I said, that's Sustainable Homes is research, accreditation, consultancy. Things that social landlords do really well is they do retrofit really well, and they have to manage stock, and that is their business model. They build and manage, they build and retain. So they have to get that management part of their business right. They're very good at engaging with residents in terms of fuel poverty and talk to them about energy bills and that type of thing, and how to lead sustainable lives. What they've been also good at is looking at building standards and delivering on those building standards. So what we find is that shift landlords tend to have an average SAP of around 70, which is higher than the rest of the social housing sector, but also just really, really good. The flip side of that is, and Richard Lupo, our senior consultant who's done some work on this, is that in order for us to meet our climate targets, we're going to have to be building at SAP levels 86 and above from now on. Otherwise, we're going to be falling well behind on that aspect. Other things that social landlords are good at is innovation. That's a passive house scheme, and they've often been at the forefront of delivering these, I don't want to say wacky, but slightly different schemes, which, you know, they've had to experiment. They're the ones who've lived it. They're the ones who've done it. Now, I'll say this on my last slide, but the sector is changing. I don't talk about social landlords anymore, really. I talk about housing companies. They're a different model now because after the government's 1% rent cut, and even before that, actually, they've had to start acting a bit more commercially. They're freed up to build, but they've got to build across lots of tenures, whether that's shared ownership, full private sale, build to rent, and social. So they are slightly different beasts now from what they used to be. But in terms of sustainability, what that means is that they're going to have to get used to some very different ways of doing. One thing that we found through Shift and through our accreditation is that social landlords are not that great at doing climate resilience, climate adaptations, not only of their new and existing stock, but also of their businesses. It's no accident that some of the best businesses in the world, and I say to you, as the Walmart, people like that, have actually taken account of the future climate risks to their business, and they are performing well because they've already started to look at their supply chains, they've already started to look at the impact of climate change on their businesses and on what they do. Social landlords are going to have to do the same. If I build a house today, the climate that I'm building in today is in 2017 is going to be different in 2080. And so the houses that I build now that are still going to be there need to take account of that fact. Social landlords, like I said, they do the basics very well. But actually what they need to start looking at is divestment from fossil fuels. That's the picture there. And really getting into that, what I call phase 2 sustainability stuff, which is looking at supply chains, which is looking at divestment from fossil fuels. And that is not of just their pension funds, but also of their supply chains and their business operations. The two are kind of related. This one is talking about contract management. Now, on the surface of it, you might not think, well, what's sustainability got to do with contract management? Well, actually, a lot of sustainable kit goes in homes, or kit that's labelled as sustainable, and we can talk, Tony mentioned it, combined heat and power, air source heat pumps. And they get a bad name because they're not installed properly. And part of that is down to the contract and management from the client, and they need to get much better at it if we have got any hope of putting in other technology other than gas boilers. The last one is supply chain. So through Shift, especially in the next iterations of Shift that we're rolling out this year and next year, we will really be drilling down on housing company supply chains and how they manage those supply chains, both in terms of carbon and climate resilience, because not only do we believe that there is a carbon saving there, but there's a cost saving there for the client. Last slide. I've said the distinctions between the sectors are now being blurred. You can't really just talk of social landlords, you've got to talk of housing companies because they are doing everything across all tenures. So that distinction is becoming blurred. What I will say on that is that that means a different business model. If you're a private developer, you build and leave. If you're a housing association or a housing company, you build and retain. That has a big impact on your sustainability strategies over the next 20, 30, 40 years of that development, which also impacts on your design and your thinking around that design. Sustainability is central as either a marketing tool or a social purpose, and I won't say any more on social purpose because the last two speakers have touched on that. And I'm saying responsible investors will have a huge role to play in putting in standards in place for house builders in the social sector to build to higher standards, to operate to higher standards if they want to get hands on that money. The flip side of that is that those investors will play a key part in tackling climate change. So, thank you, and I'll hand over to Claire.
Hi there, so I'm Claire Murray from Levitt Bernstein. I'm Head of Sustainability there. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about design today. I've also got some slides. So by 2050, the population of London could increase by as much as 50%. It's never been more important to make our urban homes sustainable places to live. But as Jan Gehl once said, an endless number of green buildings does not make a sustainable city. We should be creating a series of positive places and spaces where the sound of birds replaces the noise of traffic and tree-lined streets replaces parking. Streets should no longer be seen as linear vehicular routes. They should instead be permeable paths for walking and cycling, designed to engender active lifestyles, be permeable with green spaces en route dedicated to play, nature, and growing food. The growth of the autonomous vehicles and smart streets are set to change the way people move around cities, allowing more pedestrian-friendly routes, reduced parking areas, and decluttered streets. As highlighted by a recent study, changes in the vehicle technologies can lead to 15 to 20% increase in developable area. Barcelona's urban mobility plan is a great working example of how roads can be transformed and given back to the people. But we don't have to wait to retrospectively alter our built environments. They can be designed that way from the beginning. The design of our homes affects the way people feel. It's not just about making the building look good. Consideration should be given to window design for daylight and views, moving away from endless floor-to-ceiling windows that cause excess heat gain and heat loss, which are typically only suitable for show homes. With increases in fabric efficiency and warmer summers, building new homes to prevent overheating is a constant challenge, one which will test us under the future climate scenarios. So let's future-proof our homes, utilizing good orientation with integrated design features that provide shading, light color services which reduce the urban heat island effect, exposed thermal mass, and effective natural cross-ventilation. We now have more ways of monitoring our every condition as markers of our health. People will regularly check these metrics in the future and expect our homes to provide the opportunities for optimum conditions and positive responses. We should use this to challenge our perception of housing, design and construction, and embrace the changes required to protect our future. But as our homes become more densely packed to accommodate demand, we need to be more creative about protecting our existing green spaces and making the spaces between our buildings work harder. This means creating integrated biodiverse green space and habitats to support local wildlife, while using features such as rain gardens to channel water into our flower beds. Views and access to natural features, whether on the ground, roofs, or walls, will have strong links to health and well-being, counteracting stress and providing opportunities for social interaction. It's through the connection of these outdoor spaces that our internal environments we can bring back nature back into our homes. But well-designed, healthy neighbourhoods are much about the needs of the people who live there, including good access to play, where clothes are dried, and how residents sleep at night. We should not just be delivering units, but gifting people with the ability to live sustainable lifestyles. Research carried out by ZCD highlighted the impact of the design and on the activities that take place in external spaces, showing the benefit to community life from allowing children to play independently outside and reducing loneliness with the elderly. But to make these external spaces successful, we need to recognise that they would need more intense, long-term and flexible management to ensure that they are inviting and well used. We should engage with residents to provide well-maintained spaces that they can assist in managing and use long-term support to support each other's needs. Only when we regularly monitor and learn from the buildings and spaces we design and build will we discover that whether they perform as intended. It's no longer acceptable to assume the homes that we build are meeting residents' needs just because they live in them. So I have a little bit of a call to action. We all have a responsibility to build homes for the people who are living there and build buildings that last. We should use the high-level thought leadership and research available to turn our creative thinking into delivery on the ground. With this in mind, I would like to call on architects and design teams to go back to basic thermal design for the layout of our homes and cities to make them more comfortable and healthy places to be. I would like to call on developers, house builders, and contractors to embrace change and be mindful of the unintended consequences of following business as usual. And finally, I would like to call on investors to utilize long-term finance initiatives to invest in a sustainable future where quality and longevity are drivers. Ultimately, we are responsible for the number of lives we change, not just the number of houses that we build. Thank you.
Well, that was a rousing call to action there. Thank you, Claire, and thank you all for sticking to your fairly tight briefs. So I'm going to kick off with a few questions of my own, if I may, which I'll direct to one or two of you individually, and then I think we have 2 roving mics, so when we open to the floor, just put your hands up and the mics will come to you. Tony, I wonder if perhaps I could start by directing some of my earlier challenges around the scale and the quality issues to you. The government tends to present us with a choice between the number of new homes and the standards to which they're built. In other words, you know, if we impose particular standards, particularly on the environmental and sustainability performance aspects, we can't build as many. From Berkeley Group's experience, is that sort of dichotomy a fair one?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, basically, at the end of the day, I mean, you're touching on planning and delivery and that. First of all, where Claire's right, we are doubling the densities. I'm not sure we quite agree about the values. I mean, most homes, if you debate it with us that we build, don't really need heating. I mean, it's a hell of a debate we're looking at the moment. But going back to planning, I mean, I think that what we should have is there should be a democracy about it. There should be a debate about it. But once the planning permission's been decided, and the assumption is that we've been given the planning, this government having us bogged down in red tape, I think, is the big challenge. Now, we would say it as house builders, wouldn't we? But, you know, we're talking about affordability, we're talking about placemaking, we're talking about a lot of debate here. So to spend anything between 1 year and 3 years signing what we call 106, which are the technical documents and clearing the planning permissions at a start, is, I think, a crime when society's got a housing crisis. And if we could make a call to action today to the government, and they've just put out a white paper about it again, let's deal with the red tape, let's deal with the bureaucracy. put the onus more back on the industry, as Claire suggested, to meet the standards in the day. You know, why do we need 800 planning conditions for the 1% that misbehave? Let's find the 1%. So my call would be very clear. I'd like to see the government address the red tape. I'd like to see them put more planning officers in. I'd like to see them put more technical people in so that we can get on with the job after we've had this debate about whether we should build in your backyard or next to you or over that station. Once that planning permission is approved, the industry should be forced to get on with it.
And in terms of that planning permission and the performance standards, would you be in support of a national standards, you know, code for sustainable homes, zero carbon standard have both gone? Which should it be, a national standard or a more local or city-driven set of standards?
Look, it's too easy for you to ask me that question and too easy for me to answer the easy way. But where I would go quite simply, if you put 20 people out of the industry, a cross-section of architects, a cross-section of people that care about placemaking, and that you would come up with a standard set of conditions that would release it right at the end of the day. You know, when we get, you know, we have a national building reg. It still doesn't stop the local authority putting 800 planning conditions, which incidentally, they haven't got the staff to deal with. So having put them on us, which is what takes them a long time to do, they then can't process them. So we end up often at risk on it. I mean, at the end of the day, we could very clearly set up a set of standards, and the government could set up a commission that set the standards out to which we all behave and build to, be it sustainable and be it building regs and all the requirements that everybody's looking for. But we need to get into this production, which hopefully modern methods of construction that we're all looking at and we're being forced to look at, which is a good thing, will make another big change.
Okay, at which point, Dan, it might be sensible to bring you in. I mean, you've described a new business model and some really astonishing numbers already being targeted there, as well as channeling this strong commitment to sustainability. So you make it almost sound too easy. If it works that well, why are other institutions and developers not doing more of it? What are the pitfalls?
I think they are. They are joining the party. Other institutions are starting to commit money to the sector. They're recognising their end client, pensioners, want their money to be used in a good way. But it's complicated. I think the problems Tony points out, that the planning system is really difficult to navigate. It reverts people to the lowest common denominator. There is a floor which you have to hit in building regulations. There's very little incentive to innovate and create something new and push the boundaries and push to excellence rather than just achieving the minimum. But there are others in the market. It just takes a long time to get planning, to build it, to work out how you're going to run these buildings when they're up and built. So in 5 years' time, there will be thousands and thousands of purpose-built residential rental properties owned by pension funds across the UK. But at the moment, there is 1 or 2 in the whole of the country out of 28 million homes. So it is coming.
And I'm interested in particularly the long-term investment horizons that you described and your ability or the potential conflict between your sustainability commitments and your fiduciary duties to provide a really strong return on investment to those pension holders. But can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, the conflicts that were so far aren't costs to us. If we're trying to deliver cash flow back to pensioners, then running costs of buildings are things that affect us. And obviously the rents that we can charge, but the running costs which we incur. Anything that reduces those running costs is, and that's a capital payment up front day one, anything that reduces those running costs to us increases the long-term cash flow back to an investor. So we find they make economic sense, that 20-year payback on some different proposals in designs makes sense. And if we can design those in day one, it's much cheaper than retrofitting at a later date. We're not looking at buying any existing buildings and retrofitting. We're looking at building everything from scratch so that we can design these things in day one.
Okay, thank you. That brings in quite neatly the sort of retrofit challenge. Bevan, you pointed to some of the current findings from your knowledge of the social landlord sector and so on. What do you think would constitute real sort of sustainability leadership, as it were, for our existing housing stock?
I think in new build it's really easy to talk about standards because you're starting from scratch, so you've got a blank canvas essentially. I think in the retrofit world the challenge is that there is no real standard to build to, so you don't get that consistency. And one thing that in my previous experience, when you're trying to develop a site, you're trying to develop a scheme, you just want consistency, whether you're working in Islington or whether you're working in Derby or whether you're working wherever. In the retrofit world, that's not there. So we do need some leadership in terms of, here is a retrofit standard. We know that certain retrofit and certain buildings cannot be retrofitted to get you a SAP of 86 or higher, but we do need something to say, this is what you can get to, this is the standard you should be achieving. It's not building regs, have to say, because in my view, they're not fit for purpose. They will not get us anywhere near our carbon targets. But you do need consistency, and that's the issue. And I know that that's a struggle for whether you're an RSL or a house builder, is that London has a different set of standards, but they're consistent, so you know that's what you can do in London. But the minute you step out of London, you could be doing any combination of things, and it's not great. The other side of retrofit leadership is, let's go beyond doing the basics. Everyone can do windows, everyone can do insulation. The next challenge is really looking at energy generation and how you heat those homes. And I'm afraid to say that in the RSL sector, the default is let's put a gas boiler in. Well, now's the time to start upskilling and getting used to the fact that there are other technologies out there, and our energy generation within the home is going to become a lot more fragmented than it is now. It's not just going to be gas boilers. It is going to be air source heat pumps. It's going to be ground source heat pumps. It's going to be MVHR. All these horrible bits of kit which we just don't know how to do, where our supply chains aren't mature enough in the UK to necessarily install or manage properly, we're going to have to start getting used to them. They'll have a massive impact on our retrofit strategies going forward for the next 20 to 30 years.
For which we clearly need that clarity and consistency in policy backdrop. I'm also interested in, you mentioned social purpose and social value. Is the Social Value Act something that we could see having more teeth in terms of driving some of those socioeconomic and particular benefits of housing, existing, both existing and new?
Definitely, yeah.
Sorry, Bevan, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. In social value, yes. Sustainable homes, we've traditionally talked about environmental sustainability, but we all know that those of us who are schooled in sustainability, it's environment, it's economics, and it's society. So that social value has to come into it. So if I give you the example of fuel poverty, for example, fuel poverty is an economic issue, it's an environmental issue, and it leads to a social issue. So let's not pretend that these things can sit in different boxes. Driving that social value is something that's really key to something that I like to look at in my own time, is responsible business and how responsible businesses actually operate in the economy we've got today. That's a really important thing. It's not just about I can build a great home and I can plonk it there and it's got great landscaping and it protects me against climate change. But if I'm not doing anything about the local economy, or if I'm not making sure that there is an actual social impact of what I'm doing, then there's absolutely no point in just building it and then just doing whatever. And whether you're an RSL or whether you're Berkeley Homes, there are programs in place where the really good people in the industry do those things beyond the boundaries of that building site. And that has a long-lasting effect on terms of people feeding back into the industry, local economy, and kind of local communities.
So Claire, that last statement you made in your speech about ultimately we're responsible for the number of lives rather than the number of units segues quite neatly there and is a very powerful sort of image somehow. Can you tell us, if we were to segue from one to the other, what sort of change in mindsets in particular do you think that would require?
Yeah, so I think really it's down to designers thinking about the way they have put their building together. It's not just about orientating our homes in any direction on site. It's about thinking about which way they're facing for every unit on site. There's a person in every one of those homes. And then it's thinking about the quality on top of that, the quality of the fixtures we're providing, the quality of the building materials so that they're durable and long-lasting. I think it's really important that we all take our part. So when designers design these things in and they mean it, the developers understand that and they take it on board and they understand where perhaps they might need to change business models. And then the hope is that investors can then use that to invest in long-term models. So I think it really is about looking at all of our plant to pay, but beginning with design and using that and moving that forward through to development and construction on site.
And just because I can't help myself as a future leader alumni, how optimistic are you about the sort of legacy that's being left by the current CEO community?
I think there's a lot of really, really good thought leadership out there. I think that the minds are in the right places. It's just about making that happen on the ground and really getting some traction from those leaders to make sure that these things go through and followed through on site.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the floor. We've got about 12 minutes or so before we probably need to bring to a close. So please put your hands up and tell us who you are before asking your question. If you're directing it to one person, let us know. There's a couple over there. I might take two at a time if that's all right. Otherwise, we'll run out of space. So let's take these two first. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's John Johnson from Reach Homes in Sheffield. We're building what's going to be the world's first passive house shipping container conversion. We're a social enterprise, and we're going to put our surplus money back into retrofitting and so on. So we're looking at new models. I welcome the white paper, although I wish it had been published a bit earlier. It would have saved me printing our leaflets. But how can the industry help a small business such as mine deliver on those commitments in the white paper to bring more SME building in and help us meet those very reaching targets for new homes?
Okay, great. Good question. And there was another one just here.
Hello, right. My name's Frank Vickery. I've worked for 40 years in social
Maybe
housing.
put the mic a bit closer so it's hard to hear you.
Right, sorry.
Perfect.
My name is Frank Vickery, and I've worked in social housing for 40 years in East London. The big issue that we're facing, I think, in the long term, and that has not been mentioned today, is the wayward way that service charges are applied to these high-density schemes. It's almost impossible to fund the social housing rent levels and pay the service charges that are coming up. Also, part of the heating bills is that the small energy companies have massive overheads, particularly long-term replacement of their equipment, which cannot compete with the big industry.
Okay, so we have two quite different questions. One on the housing white paper and how we can stimulate SMEs to build more homes, and another very much more on the service charges of social landlords and the sort of increase in those. Any responses, Tony?
To deal with your question first, I have a lot of sympathy with the SMEs, and I think it was 80% of our housing just after war used to be built by small owner drivers, where you get the care, you get the passion, you get the quality. But my view is quite simple about this. I started Berkeley 40 years ago. I wouldn't claim to be an architect. I went in with a piece of A4 and I drew the first house as best I could sketch it, as I'm sure you do. 6 weeks later, I had a planning permission. Add to that, when I walked into my bank manager and asked him to lend me some money, I didn't have to have 76-page agreement. He signed me up on a 2-page letter, and I didn't have to give him a personal guarantee. So until such time as the government recognises that you're doing a good job and they fund you and help you get over that funding, and they get that planning for you on smaller sites much easier, you can't go through the same due process as the large companies like us can. So I think they actually lock you out and they make it easier for us, and we grow so we don't get the competition. But I support where you are in that.
Thank you. Any other responses to the first question before we move on to the second? Bevan, can I direct the second question to you in terms of social landlords and the rising hikes in social...
And service charges, I think it was deliberately not mentioned because it's such a thorny issue. I think I have to ground this back into sustainability and what comes in my experience of where service charges have come from, is that generally it comes from this. There's all this information that comes in, and I have to give you a service charge at some point. The issue that I have had with service charges in the past is that it's a complex point where there is a certain knowledge to a point, but then you can't get past that point because people aren't skilled in necessarily pricing in the cost of X, Y, and Z of maintaining this kit. Equally, that's down to the fact that we don't have the right supply chain and we don't engage with that supply chain properly. So for social landlords, I think there's a lot more to be said around engaging with the right bits of that supply chain, whether it's an energy company, whether it's a CHP provider, to understand the true cost of doing and delivering these things in a home. And it's like I said, we've got to get away from an obsession. The government has moved away from it. We've got to get away from it, is just having a gas boiler. Because once you start saying there are other bits of technology out there, that changes your whole business model, that changes your supply chain, and it essentially changes how your how your service charges are done. The other side is that what we need, and I have lots of friends who live in apartments with service charges, is you need a lot more resident bite back on what that service charge is made up of. And if the housing association or housing company or management company cannot give you a detailed breakdown of that, well then you've got the power of the people who live there. And I think there does need to be a lot more scrutiny of what should be a standard on your service charge balance sheet, but also the justification for those extra costs that comes in. So more transparency and a lot more resident action. I think you get some of that, get some of the way there.
Thank you. Let's take a couple more questions. There's one at the back there and one just here.
I think you lost that.
Yeah, Susan May, Head of Design and Quality at Clarion Housing Group. It's a question for Dan, if that's okay. It's a couple of points around the use of off-site manufacturing for the build-to-rent sector. Obviously finding that very interesting, seeing how Legal and General are developing that. And just a couple of points on that, if you can respond to those. One is particularly using it as a long-term investment. It's very interesting because traditionally OSM has been used for more temporary housing, obviously hotels and things that are very, very standard, but for it to be used for very mixed community into the long term, fascinating. We're really watching you and cheering you on. But I'm just really interested to know how you've looked at that in terms of long-term components of your MMC installations. Will the manufacturers and suppliers be around in 50 years when you need to overhaul that investment? And the other thing is around the kind of place quality side. Obviously, MMC lends itself to very uniform standard designs and repeatability, which doesn't always connect really with communities and our appreciation of buildings. So how have you squared that circle in terms of your long-term pipeline? Thank you.
Yeah, firstly, on the economics, why are we considering it? I don't really want to build homes, I guess. I just want to own the completed thing and rent it out. I want the cash flow for pensioners. I don't want the risks and the struggle of planning committees and all sorts. Modern methods of construction builds them quicker. And we want them occupied as quickly as possible because we want to start getting that income as quickly as possible. So economically, they stack up because of the speed of delivery, and on large schemes we could save a year in construction, and that's a year of rent we would otherwise not receive. So economically they work. I think I'd challenge whether now we need conformity in modern methods of construction. We're generally looking at building apartment blocks, so from varying in height. But when we're building those apartment blocks, we can design in up front the layouts, so the architects can design the layouts. But there's no need for conformity within the apartments. The actual shell and the structure can be consistent, but within the apartments you can have different specs, different finishes. And we had a team in Japan a couple of weeks ago who saw an amazing business who produce 8,000 homes per month in factories across Japan, and they are all bespoke. And you go to a showroom and you choose the complete finish you want and the design you want. So using modern methods of construction, using robotics, there's no need for every apartment to be the same. You can have that flexibility.
Thank you, Dan. Let's take two questions at once before we respond. These are probably the last two. So there was one back there, and there's one in the middle at the back there. Yeah, go for it.
Hi there. My name's Hamish Blair. I'm a director of a company called DCO. We focus on renewable and automation technologies for houses. Kind of similar to the question just before, but Tony, if I can direct this one to you, thinking about prefab, thinking about CNC methods, and also the 3D printing of houses, which has gained a lot of traction in the press. Is this something that you would see Berkeley Group looking at, and what are the kind of the roadblocks you see at the moment to putting maybe quicker and more sustainable house building methods in place?
Well, the first thing we'd say to you is...
Sorry, Tony, can I just take the one last question and then we'll deal with both of them together? Sorry, because we'll run out of time. There was one right at the back.
Yep. I'm from Sherl Hill Limited. It's a small co-housing group for older people in Sheffield. Sheffield's obviously a standard centre for innovation and development at the moment. I suppose we would count ourselves as an SME. My question is about support for a varied ecology of provision and development. We found ourselves faced with multiple challenges, just like the people who have spoken. And I'd like to sort of address my question to Tony in terms of partnership and sustainability with provision whereby co-housing groups who can be seen as perhaps a small drop in the ocean of the provision of housing.
Okay.
But it could be a much wider provision if there was opportunities for partnership. Also for talking to Dan about investment. Like I said, we're only a very small drop in the ocean, but £2 million of our own money has been invested. We've really struggled with raising funds to do that, and also in terms of standards. Talking to Bevan now, getting advice about how to build sustainably. We're trying to go near passive house standards for new homes.
Okay.
We're trying to retrofit a very old Victorian building, and we've really struggled to get information and good advice.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that some of that maybe gets responded to outside the session, because you could do some of that one-to-one. But Tony, a couple of questions directed at you, and then I'd like Claire to come in on the partnerships point as well. Go for it.
Well, the first thing we'd say is that the word prefab is banned in our vocabulary. First of all, we'd make the point that it's a method of construction. So whether it's traditional construction, whether it's concrete frame, whether it's steel frame, it's still somebody's home. Berkeley's worked on something called the Urban House for the last 12 years. We've built it, we've tested it, because the only way we can test the market is to have human beings live it and see if they think that it works. And we have now gone nap on that, and it's public knowledge generally. I mean, we've built about 100 of these units, different places, different locations, and they've been tested by everybody. And Berkeley is now just about to start building its own factory and will go into production. We spent a lot of time at this about labouring the point, because somebody said earlier on, it is somebody's home. It can't be standard off a drawing board. There's a lot we can do that's standard, but equally you've got to think about all the small things that makes it somebody's home. That's where we go to with that. Okay. Can I just say one other thing too, because I think it's important. You've all got to remember, and you've all said it today, those questions. These council estates that we regenerate, and we have about 12 of them on at the moment, they're all enormous. It fascinates me after 20 and 30 years how degradation sits in and how they fell. Now we've doubled up the densities of these. We've doubled up the park space of these places. But what fascinates me more, I mean, and I'm sure somewhere we get a standard. We don't charge a service charge to the social element of that. But what we do, and what we do believe's got to happen, because there's something wrong with society, the people who live there have got to become a community, and we spend our life making them a community, setting up management companies that they run. And we run them from day one, both the social side of the site and the private side of the site. And they sit comfortably together, and we're 10 and 12 years into some of these developments, right? And when the ownership goes to the place, you get sustainability. and those houses will be standing in 100 years' time, and that place will be somewhere that will be safe in 100 years' time. And I think that's something we haven't touched on today.
Test of time. Yeah, we're under test of time right now. Any other burning comments from anyone else on the panel?
I'd just like to touch on the gentleman's point at the back. Sorry, it was quite a long question, so I'll just touch on part of it. But in terms of how you design for things like passive house and whether regulation supports you, I'd say get the right teams involved at the right stages, and it's not a difficult task. Yes, there might be very slightly more cost associated on site, but you can do it within the design parameters that you typically work in. So I think definitely go for that. And just touching on things like the red tape items, I'd say that perhaps enough red tape has been cut in sustainability. We've lost zero carbon, we've lost code for sustainable homes. And I think now's the time that we all work together to actually create those homes and to move forward on that.
Brilliant. Thank you. I need to draw the session to a close. So some really powerful food for thought there on the future of sustainable housing, and covering a whole wide range of different examples of how you're each individually and organisationally pushing beyond, in some instances, legislative standards and so on. There's no doubt that the future is very, for those of you that know the acronym VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and I forget what the A is, but it requires us to sort of really take responsibility and instill this sense of leadership that we're talking about today. That requires courage and determination, but it also requires that vision and purpose, which we've heard a bit about, but also that open and collaborative approach to working together and making this less about a competition and a competitive advantage, more an opportunity to achieve better outcomes by working together. So we at UK-GBC will continue to do a huge amount of work around leadership, cultivating the leaders of today and tomorrow. We're bringing future and current leaders together in a variety of different forums throughout this event. Please do come along to these sessions on each of the EcoBuild days. And for now, enjoy the rest of your EcoBuild, and thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much.